science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
All right, interdimensional salutations, all you cognonauts out there. Welcome to Exofathom. This is
my
our
goodness.
second episode in a multiple series covering the Gateway experience. Thanks so much for joining us once again. If you haven't heard the first episode, I highly suggest that you dive into that one first before jumping into this one. We're going to be kind of just hitting the ground running. So thank you for listening, everybody. I am Nick, and I am joined with my co-host, Ayla.
Hello.
Thanks for joining me yet again. I think what we can do is just give a real brief summary of what we had talked about before, and I'm going to make that as super brief as possible. So basically, this series is covering a document that was conducted by the U.S. Army Intelligence Service and did an investigation on a transcendental meditation program called the Gateway Experience. The aim of the report was to further understand how the mechanisms of deep meditation, hypnosis, consciousness all work hand in hand, and probably an effort to create a more precise and sophisticated soldier. What's great about this document, though, is that it gets into some really meaty topics as far as the nature of consciousness and reality. And in our previous episode, we started the kind of preamble to this whole thing, and we got a little bit into it. But we had to cut it short because it's just so dense. So we're going to be doing multiple episodes of this particular document. Then we'll probably move on to some other stuff. I know I was talking to Ayla about potentially doing a Westworld series about how the technology in Westworld is very close to what we have in our current era, and maybe some examples of that. So stay tuned, and just keep on listening, you guys. Thank you so much, and we hope to have some really great content going forward. So did I miss anything there, Ayla?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. Really excited about Westworld, and we just started watching the show Devs to be determined if it is really good or if it's just a lot of hype. But
I think it's so far so good.
Okay, right? I don't know. I think it's one of those things you have to watch it in pieces because there's a lot happening, and it's a story and it's a narrative, and you don't know how you feel about any of the characters. So I think that'll be fun to chat about. But getting back to the reason we're talking tonight, I think that last time when we spoke, the only other thing you might have missed was the element of sound. Because I think part of the Gateway Project was a series of beats that you would listen to, and it would kind of like alter your brain waves, similar to what you would see during meditation or in a float tank, for example. So I think that was the only thing. But yeah, great summary so far.
Thanks so much. And so as Ayla mentions, part of this Gateway experience that we're going to continue to talk about tonight has to do with binaural beats and frequencies utilized during meditation. If you guys are unfamiliar with these types of methods of sound therapy, I guess, look them up. You can check them out on YouTube. Just type in binaural beats. There's lots of them dedicated to meditation, deep relaxation, focus, basically anything you can think of. And so in this report, we're basically seeing the military's summation of the utilization of frequency and binaural beats with meditation in order to create a more, powerful soldier or individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is just sort of playing with the potential of maybe mind over matter. And so, it could be used to enhance athletic ability. I know there's a lot of, like athletic counselors and ways to help make an athlete stronger and faster. But I also think that it could be applied to just in terms of learning information. If you need someone to kind of be like a human supercomputer, I'm sure that some of these techniques would be geared at just kind of focusing and, I don't know, getting the brain at its best capacity to do that.
Yeah, it would be pretty interesting to know if they measured, and maybe we'll get into that at some point in this document, if they actually measured cognitive ability in relation to these practices.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's so hard. My dad just shared with me an article from Canada saying that they proved the IQ test doesn't work, something like that. And then you start thinking, yeah, how do you measure cognitive ability or creativity for that matter? It's a hard one.
Yeah, certainly. Well, and IQ tests are definitely up for debate. They certainly measure something, but it's not necessarily intelligence precisely. More maybe pattern recognition.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, because all the questions, they're like, oh, there's these 9 dots, and you need
Right.
to like do something with them. Mm-hmm.
Totally. Okay. Well, without much further ado, Ayla, will you do us the honors and start with paragraph 6?
Sure thing. And I had a bit of a panic as we logged on. My pages were out of order. So I tried to figure out where we started last time. So that was some focus tone that you heard. So anyway, let's get into it. Like you said, section 6 is called Lamp versus Laser. It starts out with Melissa Yeager uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of hemisync in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind in its natural state may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind, under the discipline of hemisync, acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a distant stream of light. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Okay, I think I need to stop there.
Sure.
Wait, what? Okay, first of all, do we need to go back over what hemisync actually is again?
Sure. If you want to give us a brief reminder of what the hemisync process is.
Sure. So just looking at the previous paragraph, it says here, audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain hemisync with the Institute's basic focus tapes. Wait, that doesn't define it.
Oh, that's okay. I can kind of sum it up.
Oh, thank you.
Basically, I think we talked about this in the previous paragraphs. The idea of hemisync is activating and stimulating the hemispheres of the brain in a way that they resonate together at the same frequency.
Right.
So that the interconnectivity between between the hemispheres is much more augmented and enhanced. Therefore, you're able to utilize your brain in a more efficient and superior way comparatively to, I guess, a normal brain.
That makes sense. And I found the quote that's best to describe it too. It says, this focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. So yeah, it's like the two sides working together.
Well, I think we also call that in the West, at least I've heard of it called as flow state before. I don't know. I'm sure you've experienced it when you get really deep in the zone with work or something else, or riding a bike or whatever. You get into that really deep meditative zone where time can kind of, pass you by, and you're in some sort of deeper concentration than you normally are. I think people perhaps don't realize that they can access those points a lot more easily than they might have thought.
Well, yeah, no, definitely. I think that's such a good way to describe it. I mean, just today, I totally forgot to eat lunch. I was working on these really fun projects, and I was just hammering away, and I was feeling good. I had music, and I'm like emailing, and it was 5:45 before I
Yeah.
knew it. And the other time that'll happen is on a road trip. You ever notice how sometimes a road trip will feel really long, but under the right circumstances, it's like you just teleported. It just goes by so fast.
Yeah, it's
Um,
usually the moment when you decide to let go of looking at the time and obsessing about how far away you are.
well,
Which
and then
usually
that's
happens in the last end of the trip anyways.
it's true. Well, and I think that's interesting though, because it's, like where you put your focus on and your attention,
Mm.
that's going to kind of drive your, I guess, at least in this case, the perception of time. It can play with it that way. But what do they say? Time flies when you're having fun.
Oh, certainly. Well, and I think it's interesting in this paragraph so far, the idea or not the idea, but like the concept of equating thought to light.
Hmm.
And in the case of calling it a lamp or a laser, the idea that you're able to focus your thoughts and focus your brain concentration like a lamp or a laser. I thought it was pretty interesting, the idea that perhaps thought is a form of communication that might be faster or equate to the speed of light. Perhaps even it acts in the same sort of ways, like light is a particle and a wave. So perhaps that's what they're kind of getting at with this lamp versus laser thing, where it's like your brain output can be a particle or a wave.
I could see that.
Maybe.
Well, I mean, I was thinking about that today. I was laying in the hammock, kind of thinking about this write up here, and I started to just wonder about the way our brains work. They're just, like you said, they're these little stimuli that happens in a blink of a moment, but that's a decision. And in the brain itself, it does kind of spark up a little like electrical pulse. So in the physical world, there is technically a little light there. Well, maybe is there? I don't know. That could have just been the like documentary that I saw. I'm not
Well,
a
it's the age-old
neuroscientist, but
illustration of an idea, right? What is it?
yeah.
It's a
Oh
light
yeah, it's
bulb
a light
above your
bulb.
head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, but there was like I'll have to post it later, but there was some video that was of a brain inside of a CAT scan or an MRI machine, and
Mm.
it was able to register like decision making. Like you could see it on the little screen. So I'll have to find that and share it here because it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. Continue now. I was a little lost there, but you got me back on track. I appreciate it. So it continues here where it says, Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both so that the human mind is soon resonating at ever higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and oral perception. Oral perception. That's okay. So that wasn't a Freudian slip. I just can't say that word.
No,
Oral.
it sounds like ORAL.
Well, like I tried to pronounce it correctly and then it came out and I was like, that sounded wrong. But then I said it again and it still sounded wrong. So I'm just going to acknowledge that and move on. The last sentence is the mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper.
Well, I just wanted to point out before we go any further, they had mentioned previously that the idea is to get the brain to vibrate at higher and higher levels of frequency in order to attain different types of information. So I'm wondering if that suggests that information maybe comes in like, it's weird to say, but like packets where you, in order to gain a certain level of information, whatever that information is, still to be defined in this paper, I think. But the higher your brain vibration is, the
Synchronization of each
the
side.
synchronization of also the sympathetic synchronization. I think that's what I was trying to say. Like the program wants to get your brain to vibrate at a sympathetic frequency in order to unlock the information within that frequency. And so interestingly to me, I think there might be something to that higher vibrational frequencies contain more information. So anyways.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that could be the case because, I mean, okay, so one of the things I had a hard time with when studying physics was light and light waves. And I guess maybe sound at the same time. Just the sense that, you know, the length of a wave can influence the perception of it down the road. Just as, like, you know, so like if it's a really short wave, that's like one pitch and sound and tone. And then if it's like really long, it's like you can't even hear it, like, you know, like elephants versus like a bird. Yeah. And so that was always really confusing to me because like what is that, like, I mean, like, so does like a sound physical? No, it's like, what, like, so I think it's not outside of the realm of possibility for a brain to be able to function at its highest level, and then all of a sudden it can, like, I don't know, just be enhanced in its usage. I'm just thinking.
I certainly think that sound is, in some respect, physical. Just the way sound moves through air is a physical thing. The waves you were mentioning, those are definitely physical waves.
I really need to go back and read some physics. But what I guess what I was just thinking about was the Sherlock show where he has the mind palace. And so it's interesting because here it's almost as if there's a physical influence. So you have sound coming in. It affects the brain such that the brain can do something special. But then that's one thing. And then in the Sherlock show, it's more about the internal consciousness creating this like mind palace, and then it accesses information that way. Which isn't physical at all. So I thought that's really an interesting distinction between the two. And you probably can define mind palace better than I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we certainly can get into the idea of mind palaces and mnemonic devices for memory in some other episode, because I'm sure that's probably a discussion all of its own.
Very true.
Yeah, but definitely the idea of a mind palace. This is kind of a mnemonic device, visual mnemonic device, basically, where you're able to remember large sums of information if you follow the same sort of visual pattern in your head. So most people think of it as a house or a palace or a mansion, or most of the time it's better to think of it as a house that you grew up in or somewhere that you're familiar with. So the idea is that if you want to store a piece of information, you go through this mental process of walking into the house. And you never vary from the process leading up into getting into the house. So the idea would be, if I want to remember a certain word, I would go into my brain, visualize my mind palace, walk to it the same way I always walk to it, grab the door with the same hand I always grab the door, look at the different rooms in the same order that I always look at them. And then go put that piece of information in one of those rooms. And doing those visual, cues in that process will help you actually bring up words or memories or whatever. I mean, I've done it a couple of times. It's funny because for me, it's like I just remembered a couple words and that was it. I never really used it any farther than that. But I know the word pluvious. And that means a very violent downpour of rain. Also, the word rococo, which means like very cute. So for pluvious, I just basically in my mind palace, I just basically pictured a window with rain coming down. And then for rococo, I think I pictured a raccoon in a hat, because that was the way that it reminded me of the definition of the word. So these
No,
types of things can work. Whether they're actually going to be useful is totally up to you. Of course,
well,
in
and
my case, it wasn't as useful as it is maybe just a parlor trick. So
well, I don't know about that because to be honest, I kind of feel like a cheater in that I loved The Simpsons so much as a kid, and there's like historical allusions and fictional, references all over that show. So
Mhm.
whenever I was studying for a test, all the information would remind me of Simpsons episodes. So I there were a couple times that I thought back on one and I thought, oh yes, this happened here and this happened there, which reminds me of the year that I need to reference on this test. And boom, done. It's like
Oh yeah, I mean these
really
are
weird.
just hacks for human memory. Certainly, I mean I
Mhm.
think we and again this will be a totally different episode, I'm sure, because the idea of hacking human memory is definitely a soft science, if we're gonna say, but the potential for it is definitely there. So I'll have to look it up, and maybe a future episode I'll look up some experiments on memory hacking and things.
Well, and not to go on to this tangent far too longer because I know I'm definitely taking us off the rails, but I was going to say, there's people that can learn 30 languages. I mean, how much do we really know about why those people can speak so many languages? So,
Very few people can learn 30 languages.
but they can do it.
Oh
And
yeah, there
so
are
it's like,
certainly people
what
that.
are they doing? Yeah, I'm really curious because is the difference something like a conscious level difference or is it a physical difference
I
in the
would
way they're
probably say it's subconscious or physical. You know, an over processed part of the brain, or just subconsciously good at compartmentalizing information.
Mm.
I think
Sounds
you'd be very hard pressed to be able to teach yourself 30 languages, because I think you top out at 6 on average.
That's
Most
true.
people can't learn past 6.
I'm trying to think. I think I've been trying to learn 5 very slowly. It's like I read books. I'll read books 2 chapters at a time over like a year. And then like come December I've read like 14. But not lately. It's pretty bad. But anyway, let me continue with 7 because I don't want to take it off to the rails too much. So this next section is called frequency following response. And it starts out with, to achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the hemisync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency following response, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state, sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to the theta level. Since theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist, as the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, hemisync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them, the quote beat end quote frequency. Which I'm going to stop there because I need a sip of water. But
No problem. Just a couple points there I wanted to bring up.
please do.
I think it was interesting they mentioned that brains mimic frequency, the what is it called? The frequency
Theta
following
levels.
response.
Yeah,
I
weird.
think that's pretty cool, and it has kind of a deeper connotation, or maybe a deeper sort of what do you call that? A deeper meaning behind it. If
Nuance.
if love and hate have their own frequencies, how does the brain respond to those? And how does your your reality also in turn respond to your brain vibrating on frequencies like that?
Well, it's funny. From a neuroscience standpoint, we actually do have mirror neurons, which I don't know if you've read much about these particular mirror neurons, but as social beings, our brains are hardwired to want to mimic caregivers or those that are like providing us with some sort of like protection or something like that. So you'll actually see, like in babies, they will mirror different like stress patterns of their parent, I think it is. Don't quote me on this. It's a very loose memory that I have of this, but I do know that the brain is pretty hardwired to kind of be influenced by other people. And so if that's the case, it would mean that, I mean, it's not, again, outside of the realm of possibility for brains to be influenced by love and hate, sounds.
And how important is it for us to have tales of heroicism and mythology and lore if we have those type of needs to emulate what we perceive as the ultimate good? I mean, is it a mystery that we have had ever since our creation, myths about heroes?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, and heroes come in all shapes and sizes. If you're a fan of Greek mythology, there's always equality amongst the sexes about evilness and goodness. That's for sure. Particularly evilness. Everybody was pretty evil in Greek mythology, apparently.
They really were. They did not like us.
But there must be some sort of craving deep inside of us to kind of emulate those archetypes. And like you had mentioned, the mirroring, the mirroring of I guess we call it emulation. We emulate the things that we want to be. And
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of interesting. And then with these beat frequencies, it's kind of funny because I was just ranting and raving about this very issue, but kind of similar. Well, not similar, dissimilar. I was listening to the song, and all of a sudden the audio would cut out on the left and then the right. So it was kind of like pulsating sounds. And I had to like check my headphones because I hate that difference in, like, I can hear something. Really, I can.
It's like music to my ears. I'm gonna do something real quick, and if it doesn't work, then I apologize to our audience. But I want to illustrate what these frequencies that we're talking about are. So just give me 5 seconds to play this and see if it actually works. I'm just gonna play it through my my microphone here. But this is the type of frequency that we're talking about within this program, and then within this report itself, the idea of binaural frequencies or hemisync from frequencies like this. Can you hear that, Ayla?
I can, yeah. It's very like low.
That's probably a low one. Hold on.
Is that an owl? This makes me think of a sound bath.
Yeah. So those are the type of frequencies that they're talking about when we are mentioning this whole thing. Oh, I think it's still going. Oopsie, sorry. Anyways, do you want to continue, Ayla?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I just got really calm. But yeah, no, I mean, but those beats are really great. And if you've ever been in a sound bath, especially where they have crystal singing bowls, you get this reverberation effect, and it's very comforting. And I think I heard somebody say that it kind of mimics the sounds when you were in the womb, because right, like everything's muffled and it's in water and you hear a heartbeat. So like on some, like even like on maybe a cellular level, you probably resonate a lot with that kind of like soothing, repetitive sound.
Oh,
maybe. Yeah. At least I love it. But I'll keep reading here. So it's continues with, thus availing. Oh, they just define beat frequency and then they continue. Thus availing itself of the FFR phenomenon and using the technique of beat frequencies, the gateway system uses hemisync and other audio techniques employing the FFR phenomenon to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at a virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of ever higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Monroe accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds such as sea surf to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes so as to access, via intuitive means, new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. Oh, Nick, I can't hear you actually. Are you on mute?
Sorry about that. I was just muting so that I wouldn't make noise.
Which is funny because I could hear you. I just couldn't hear you through.
Oh yeah,
through
yeah. that last part right there. The overlaying of subliminal messaging in all of this actually might be one of the reasons that the military took some interest in it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the MK Ultra project that they were working on with using these types of frequencies and colors and subliminal messaging to try to create some sort of mind control program. So it's possible that the utility for this was to be looked into as perhaps a way to interject some sort of subliminal messaging program. Now, it may not be as nefarious as it sounds. It could be something as simple as, you know, a meditation program for soldiers, some sort of affirmation program for soldiers. But I think it's interesting that in this Project Gateway experience, the use of subliminal programming is a large part of it.
No, I definitely agree. And they just kind of like snuck that in there, it seems,
Yeah.
you know, because this is like they keep it at a very low level. But, you know, I mean, you have hypnosis. That's very effective, like for helping people quit smoking and things like that. So, I mean, yeah, I can totally see how this can definitely be harnessed to kind of support some sort of ulterior motive. Maybe not ulterior, but you know what I mean? Like you said, like if it was the MK Ultra experiment, or
Right.
I still don't even really know how, like, has that been accepted in the history books as something that happened, or is that still like fringe?
Oh
theory,
no, I
or?
mean it's openly. I mean, well, the issue with our history books and actually with everything that goes on, and part of the reason I wanted to start this show is that there's so much information out there that's just be available for people that would, under normal circumstances, perhaps change their life. So the idea that the MK Ultra project exists is widely known and widely accepted now. It was speculation when it was going on, but we always learn about 30 years later that these things are actually happening. And so, yeah, the MK Ultra project was very real, and it's going to be its own series for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I think, yeah, we're going to have to get a couple of episodes in on that. Let me see here. So did you want to say anything more on the frequency following response?
No, I think that's good. Yeah.
Okay, let me keep going. So number 8 is on role of resonance. And it starts out, however, brain coherence through entrainment to beat frequencies introduced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentov, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance, approximately 7 times a second. Bentov describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. Quote, when the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks into two to go into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood, and a new pressure pulse is traveling down, these two pressure points will eventually collide somewhere up the aorta and produce an interference pattern. That's the end of his quote, and it continues. By placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. The result is a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound which echoes throughout the body and rises up into the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, this is highlighted kind of weird for me. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it is operating normally.
Very cool.
That's weird.
Yeah, isn't it? Well, they talk about how you should listen to your heart, and your heart is has neurons in it, and we're realizing that the heart can also help in decision making as well. So it would stand to reason that obviously the heart plays a big role in our overall well-being. I think it's kind of cool that it's basically just like our own built-in metronome system, and very cool too that explaining how meditation and meditative states can bring your blood pressure down. I think that that's very cool as well. I'm sure that that's why it's recommended to a lot of people with high blood pressure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'm a big fan of acupuncture, and, I would schedule it, and every now and then I would actually have my appointment on a stressful day. And it'd be really interesting because, I'd schedule it for like 1 o'clock and the whole morning was stressful. And then I go ahead and I sit in my chair and relax for about an hour. And at that point, your blood pressure goes down. Like, there's a lot of studies that acupuncture is really good for high blood pressure if that's something you want to give a try. But what was interesting is that all of a sudden I'm walking out and I'm just so relaxed that it's no longer a stressful day. That by putting my body into an extremely peaceful state, my mind then became very peaceful too, regardless of the physical external world around me on that given day.
Certainly, yeah. I think it's definitely body and mind are tied together very closely, and I think when you're conscious of one, you gain knowledge of the other.
Yeah, well, and on a totally separate side too, if you look at some seizures, most of them, they originate from the brain, but there are certain cases where the position of the heart or your blood, like it's like a heart issue, and that'll create a seizure too. I forget what kind of seizure type it is, but I always thought that was really interesting because most of those kinds of things happen up in the brainstem or the top of the brain where things are going. But to have the heart influence you that much, I don't know. That's kind of interesting too.
Well, there's certainly electroactivity happening in the heart as well. So it stands to reason that we haven't called it broken heart for no reason, right?
It made
I
me
think
sad.
the well, I mean, I think the heart definitely governs a lot of how we feel overall, and it has its own little electromagnetic, spectrum and shield, and it's like it's the head, the heart, and the gut, right? Those are basically the three thinking systems of the human species. Unless you're a man, then you have a fourth, but
Terrible.
But no, I mean, I think it's very cool and interesting. Our hearts can influence our overall well-being, and that has to do with emotions. It's not just maybe meditating and bringing your blood pressure down, but it's just your day-to-day emotion will do the same as well. Because if you have to think that emotions have this same sort of vibratory quality that these frequencies are, because everything in our universe is tied together by frequency. The only reason matter exists at all and isn't flying away from everything is because some sort of frequency holds it all together. So emotions in itself have their own frequency, and I think that our hearts are the center of our emotional being. And so when we go throughout our day with an emotional sort of whatever emotion it may be, whether it's happiness or anger or sadness, I think it helps create the reality around you just as much as your thoughts would. I mean, I don't see how it wouldn't be possible that the way you feel in your heart also would not affect the reality around you.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's well said. And, also on just an even more basic level, when you're really upset, your heart starts racing really fast. Or if you're really excited about something, it does the same thing too. So I think, the brain body connection is weird and spooky and interesting. And I think it's interesting here because these beats and like the whole way that the heart, I don't know, it's just it's creepy when you kind of just think about the science of it, because it's really just like a pulse that's shooting blood all over your body. I mean, that's like essentially all it's doing. But then there's like all these other layers to it that we can't even really fathom, in the right way.
It's like it's a own little electro factory, It's creating its own sort of sentience in a way.
Well, and it's one of the things that, like, they always measure the heartbeat or something like that. Like, it's just like, yeah, I mean, we just look at a heart. It's just kind of doing its own thing. You can take a heart out of a body and stick it in another body, and if it's viable, it's going to start beating again. Like, what is that, right? Like,
right.
I just think that's so weird. It has its own little drive.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. So we're going to probably go to number 11, I think, for tonight, because we're already running close on time here. So, yeah, let's get into brain stimulation.
All right, brain stimulation. So this one's going to continue on. It goes, Bentott's biomedical model shows that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. The resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brainstem. An electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output, just as Dr. Twemlow observed in his research on the effects of the hemisync tapes. Also, the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is in turn cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located in the skull. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system, which transfers energy in a range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric. Wait, this is hard to say.
That's okay.
6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7 to 7.5 hertz. Okay, that I'm a little thrown off by. He's talking about the brain, and then all of a sudden the Earth's ionospheric cavity comes into play.
Yeah. Okay, so I can break
What's
this down. I can break this down. Yeah. So what he's talking about here is that through the brain stimulation, through these frequencies in particular, the goal of the frequency is to start a vibration happening in the brain. And I think it's interesting. They talked about the third left ventricle located underneath the brainstem, or located above the brainstem. Now, I don't know my brain anatomy, but that sounds pretty close to where the third eye is. And so it's interesting that they talk about how the vibration is that's where it starts in the brain, and then it kind of blossoms out of that area, the vibration, until the entire brain is basically vibrating up and down 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters. So very, very minute amount, but the brain is still indeed vibrating. What they're saying is that this vibration resonates and is also emitted by the brain into the ionosphere, which has a resonance of 7 to 7.5 hertz. So when you get your brain to start buzzing on these frequencies, you can reach levels of 6.8 to 7.5 hertz in your brain. And at that point, you have a direct connection to the ether of the Earth. You basically have a direct connection to the ionosphere of the Earth. And they're going to go in a little bit to tell you that that's where all the information is stored.
What? What? And okay, like just to kind of put some perspective in here, because this is some crazy shit, and I'm gonna start cursing a little bit more because I'm feeling comfortable. But I mean, like, you know, it's theoretical, and I haven't experienced this, but I mean, when you think about it,
well, I have.
Yeah. Well, no, I was just thinking, like, I mean, because like, it's all about this synergy that you're creating, and it's taking the extreme macro that is the Earth as a whole, and it's focusing in on the very tiny little human brain, and just looking at, like, well, what happens if these start kind of doing the same thing at the same time?
We're just microcosms of the macrocosm, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about how big the universe is, I mean, why not there be this fundamental vibration that's just resonating for like millions of miles or whatever? Like,
we'll get into that when we talk about the holographic universe that is in this paper, but we probably won't get to that tonight. So that'll be a next episode for sure, when we start talking about the harmonic frequency that probably binds the entire universe together. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that whole thing. Yeah, so Nick the other night showed me this short YouTube video, but it was just kind of detailing the different dimensions. Like, because I always told them, and I've heard there's so many different theoretical dimensions out there, but I still have yet to conceptualize it in my mind. And this video knocked it out of the park. I think by about like dimension 8, my jaw like just dropped. And again, all theoretical, but at the same time, like, this is kind of what they're theorizing, and it's some out there stuff as well. So,
well, the theory, I mean, it's not even really that theoretical. The idea of the 10-dimensional zone, I mean, it's basically just a mathematical representation. So there's not much theory involved at all. It's just what the math is telling them, basically.
I guess, but the whole concept
and the idea is that,
you
know, the complexity of the universe, dimensions, you know, first dimension starts at a single point. The second dimension is the line between the 2 points. Third dimension is one more line that creates depth, and the fourth dimension is basically a point again. and then
Yeah.
it kind of all just starts to cycle back, where it goes from point to 3 cross sections to a point again. So that in itself kind of illustrates the idea of the microcosm being a part of the macrocosm and this fractal universe idea.
And then you start talking about string theory, and then it's all crazier again. It's just some crazy stuff. Like, no, it's gonna be fun stuff. But let me knock out the rest of section 9 here. So it continues on, and it says that of this process, Bentov states, quote, "This is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 kilometer, or just about the perimeter of the planet. In other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Such a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over large distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal." End quote. The section ends with, "Consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm within the nervous system, and to significantly lower blood pressure, to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. The resulting resonance sets up a regular repetitive sound wave, which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of the Earth." Boom.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible. To me, this document is probably, I mean, I don't want to go too far because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of other documents in the future, but this is probably the best document that I've read as far as the explanation of, particular quantum theories and the universe and energy and all that. So I think it's just fascinating.
Well, yeah, I think it definitely, it draws on a lot of really meaty disciplines and ideas and theories in a very short amount of time, which is a really cool way to kind of just look at everything. And it's just funny, because he's talking about the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. Now, just what do you think of when you hear telepathic signal?
I don't know, like Professor X.
Oh my God, yeah, like the where he puts the helmet on. What is that called? The Cerebro. Yeah, I mean, the thing that always makes me get curious about stuff is the idea that before something can exist in the real world, you need to have first thought of it. So it's like all these things that we've seen in science fiction and in comic books, even today, based on the lore that we had in the 50s or the 60s, you're starting to see all these new ideas come out of applications and, like what's possible for the human mind. But the reason I get into that particular piece is that a couple years ago, I did this experiment at a yoga class. And at the end, the woman said, "Find a stranger. I'm going to play some music, really relaxing. You're just going to look into their eyes for 3 whole minutes. You can't say anything. You're just looking into their eyes." So it's awkward. It's really not comfortable. But then after the first minute, you really know that person. And then it was really funny because she would say, "Okay, now share what you both observed." And I mean, you could immediately tell someone's like emotional state. You could tell if they were like in like wanting something, or if they had just lost something, or if they were happy. Like, it was just the weirdest thing.
Yeah. Well, they say, eyes are the soul, windows to the soul, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, all these like weird little things. I mean, I think we're definitely more honeybee than we want to let on.
Well, there's a reason they're cliches, and it's not because they're cliche, it's because they're true. So
Because they resonate at 7 to 7.5 cycles per second.
Exactly. Well, it also brings up the what the saying is, that magic is just technology that hasn't been discovered yet.
Ooh, I like that. And
Yeah,
for
I
those of
think
you
that's
watching devs right now,
pretty apt.
yeah. Oh my God, I know. There's just so much happening. But should I keep going to number 10?
Yeah, we want to get through consciousness and energy at least. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right, this next one's pretty short. It's about energy entrainment, which I'm probably going to butcher, and I'm going to keep calling it energy entrapment. And I had to keep telling myself this when I first read it, so I apologize. But it goes on like this. Starts out, as the body is turned into a coherent oscillator vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium. The specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now in training because of its ability to resonate with it. This puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steadily higher levels of frequency and amplitude so as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said about this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. And my dog is having a nightmare right now. You can hear her.
Sympathetic frequencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's
It's
just pretty much fascinating. The idea, let's see, as the body is turned into a coherent isolator, vibrating in the harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the Gateway Project tapes and join the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably using the energy from the Earth's field, which now is in training because of its ability to resonate with it. So that just reminds me of, like, those, like, the kung fu movies, or like the Zen master that finally does, or I mean, we can even just go to the Star Wars movie. Yeah, exactly. When Luke Skywalker dissolves into the air, dissipates into the Force. I think it's interesting, that line where it says, putting your consciousness into the surrounding environment. That's kind of what that whole thing represents, right? You become one with the Force and then basically dissipate into this ocean of energy.
I've heard it before, man. There's this book. It's called The Celestine Prophecy. Have you ever read it?
No.
It's a little book. It's a fictional book. But, basically, well, spoiler alert, if you are going to read this book or ever plan to read this book, please silence your microphone right now or your headphones. But basically at the end, it's this person who's on this path of enlightenment. He's gone through some stuff and meets up with this group of meditators, and they're all trying to just kind of like harmonize with their environment. And their whole thing is that you go to these source forests, which would be like an ancient forest. And if you meditate there and you reach a certain level of consciousness, you basically like disappear into thin air. Like you transcend this reality, which is just so interesting. I mean, you think about nirvana, the idea is that you're born over and over and over again until you get to the point when you can like exit out, basically, like of that.
I think it's when you get to the point where your consciousness and enlightened state vibrates at such a high level that you basically dematerialize.
Yeah.
So that's what the
Something like
Buddha
that.
did under the Bodhi tree, so.
And the turtle in Kung Fu Panda.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's so many cases where we are like, hello, this is what happens when you get really like
Well, that's
Zen.
been the aim of thousands of years of tradition, honestly. I mean, we think, why have these people dedicated their whole lives to meditating
Mhm.
and trying to complete that cycle of karma and trying to transcend to the next level. We've done this for thousands of years, and perhaps we've merely just forgotten that there was a reason to all of this that wasn't just a metaphor.
Mm.
Maybe there
Mhm.
was actual reasons why people spent years and years and years meditating and trying to focus on the bigger picture of reality and existence, is because there is merit to raising your consciousness and your vibration levels.
Mhm.
And sometimes we like to throw the baby out with the bathwater because we think we're smarter than people 1,000 years ago.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're wrong.
Well, I hear you. I mean, like, what in modern society is setting our soul up for success if the Nirvana trial is true? You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
nothing.
like, yeah,
Yeah,
I feel the
absolutely
same. We're
nothing.
just
Yeah,
kind
we're
of
screwed.
yeah, we're all just repeating life over and over. That's probably why we have overpopulation, is that
Yeah.
as we've continued to progress, we've steered further and further away, and less of us are exiting out.
Well, that
Um,
certainly gets into a deeper conversation about society that we can probably have at some point too.
oh man.
The spiritual existential crisis that we seem to have in modern society.
That's well said. A spiritual existential crisis. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It
that definitely a separate conversation.
that is meaty. I'm looking at like, oh my god, it's an hour already. Um, but I mean, I think you're totally right. Like, if we don't really talk about souls much in everyday conversation, nor do we really think about it in our everyday life. So it's incredibly interesting to think how, you know, hundreds of years ago, that was the primary focus of a
Mm,
lot of humanity's day-to-day life. So just kind of thinking on that a bit more.
definitely. Okay. Well, let's take it home with the final paragraph. And then I mean, look, you guys, we still have so much more to go through. And this is as far as we were thinking we were going to get today, but we obviously haven't gotten there. So
Yeah, we were
trust us,
trying to
there's
get to
more coming,
holograms.
and there's more coming for this, and we can't wait to share more with you. Just one side note, I wanted to say thank you guys for watching. Dijon, I see you. Mom, I see you too. Thanks for watching. Appreciate
Oh,
you.
hi guys.
We appreciate you guys listening, and just wanted to give you a shout out because we do recognize that you guys are our number ones and our day ones, I should say, and
Yeah.
we will not forget that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you guys. I feel like a little hemi sync right now, right when you said their names. Well, okay, so I will continue with section 11, and it starts out, it's called Consciousness and Energy. So here we go. It's a long paragraph. I might have to break it up, but before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms matter and energy tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the 15 hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the 3 hertz. Womp womp. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph, which we ain't gonna get to. Gonna leave you on that cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's a good cliffhanger for the show, I think. Well, I mean, what's kind of cool, let's see,
that we can like literally walk through walls, because
well,
this is a
yeah, I
conversation
guess in
had.
theory, the men who stare at goats scenario is probably doable.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
Saturdays, good for that.
I think that the idea that like matter simply doesn't exist, it's just an energy grid surrounded by other energy grids.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Oh, I know what it means, man.
It means nothing is real. Like nothing
I heard your
exists.
brain
This
break.
holographic universe thing. Atoms don't even exist. They're just energy fields surrounded by other energy fields. What is that?
Yeah.
So it's just light projection.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into holograms next episode. So trust me. It's really going to cook your noodle, to use a Matrix reference. Is
No,
that
you have to start out with a
yeah.
What's really gonna cook your? Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's just yeah. Basically, the idea of the universe itself is just one hologram that's being projected from a different dimension, basically.
Equally as complex as ours, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that? I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that this paragraph was labeled consciousness and energy. Is it suggesting that perhaps all consciousness is energy vibrating at a certain frequency?
That's what I don't understand. I mean, when you think about it, one hemisphere, based on the last podcast, right, deals with language, and then the other one is a little bit more artful, a little more scattered and things like that. So, I mean, if so much of what our understanding of the world is based on our language of the world, stuff like this, I don't even know that we can fully comprehend everything that's being said about consciousness and energy. And I mean, because think about, like, consciousness is just language. Because if you didn't have words in your mind to think about stuff, what would be going on in your mind? I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
but I don't know if that's exactly true. If somebody was born without the ability to speak, they're
still have
they're
like,
not, like they're no less conscious than somebody who can.
well, they would have to not be able to speak or read or do braille. Like, what I'm saying is, like, the idea of words and language and categorization, like it kind of puts a little like net over your mind's ability to like expand outward.
Well, I think it just provides a framework for your mind and your consciousness to operate. I don't think that it intrinsically creates the consciousness or is the reason for it. I think that it's just a lattice work in which the consciousness can navigate.
Well, and this gets into like another 5 podcasts, because if I could do it all over again, I would be a linguist, hands down. Because when you start to think about the origin of language and how we really came to a consensus on various concepts and words and ideas, and how many more ideas there are to name, it's I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit mind-boggling. Because yeah, like consciousness of a caveman may not have been any different than our consciousness now. The only real big difference is that we have more vocabulary to be more nuanced in the way we think about what we think about.
Right. We have the tools to express ourselves better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
yet,
think that that's probably my point, is that consciousness never really exists because of something. I think it's just consciousness is a intrinsic part of reality, and language is the vehicle in which it explores reality.
so, but under that, like, would consciousness just be like those I am statements, like just the awareness?
No, but I mean, if we're going to this paragraph here, I think that consciousness is just an energy field. If everything is just an energy field, then so is consciousness. It's just an energy field that probably sustains a certain vibration and frequency that keeps inside of our bodies. But have you ever been in, like the flow state, and you transcendental meditation, and you're exiting your body, astral projection? So
Yeah.
there's I think that consciousness really is just like this gaseous, like gaseous sort of cloud that only stays inside of us because of the because of the nature of the fabric of reality.
I'm having a hard time with the gaseous cloud.
Wait, don't be offended by my gaseous consciousness cloud, okay?
It's a little stinky.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's right on, though, because you're right. I totally was thinking back to when you were talking about the difference of like happy, sad, or angry and happy or whatever. Like, there are words to describe that, but there's also a sensation of feeling that. And then there's a sensation of like no thought, no feeling, just like absolute present being. And I think that's a lot of what they're alluding to here. So it's almost like your daily awareness minus all the fat and just like very source consciousness.
Yeah, ego death, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in that
going back to the ethers of the ionosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
all that stuff.
yeah. I mean, do you have anything else on that, Ayla?
I mean, no, I think I'm good. I think we really covered a lot of ground here, and I am so excited to talk about holograms, guys.
Yeah.
I'm going to be watching some Star Trek, and I'm going to read up on some physics, and that way I'll be a little bit more prepared to get into it. Because I mean, holograms, I know where Nick will take it, but there's a lot of other ways to take it too. It's exciting stuff.
Well, and I think since we need to get moving on this document because we have so many other things to share with you guys, we're probably going to come back Sunday night or Monday night and do another episode, just so that we can get the ball rolling on this, because there's still so much to get into and it's fascinating. And yeah, we want to make sure that we don't wait too long, because it is quite a cliffhanger. So yeah. Thank you very much, you guys, for listening. We really appreciate it. If you have the chance, please go over to thinkering.space. This podcast is in the Thinkering family of podcasts. We're very proud to be creating this space for all of our friends and artists out there that want to contribute. We are building more and more every day, so we thank you for participating in that, and we thank you for listening tonight. We really hope you enjoyed the show, and stick around, because we're going to be back in probably a couple days, so that way we can get some more damage in on this document here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to all of you out there, and thank you to my lovely co-host Ayla. I appreciate your reading.
You're welcome. Thanks for hosting.
No problem. And you guys, stay out there, all of you cognonauts. Do you like that? I'm trying to go with something. Cognonauts is kind of hard to say, but I think it's catchy. So I'm gonna stick with it until somebody tells me not to. So from now on, my listeners, you guys are called cognonauts. So unless you tell me not to, I'm going to keep calling you that. So stay out there, everybody. And have a good night. Thank you so much.
Good night.